Hi, my name is Will Brown and welcome to the WPQuickies series, bite-sized WordPress tips and tricks in 30 minutes or less. So today I'm going to be looking at WordPress's built-in privacy tools. Before we get started, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ding that bell if you're watching on YouTube to get my latest video updates. And just drop a comment in the comments below. Just let me know who's online, where you're from. I've got a few people in there already. So Gordon, good afternoon to you. And Morris, good afternoon. Alan, hi, how are you doing? Jean, good to have you here from the Central Coast. And Mr. Meowpuss, you've updated your icon. I like your avatar. Oh, I love that. Thank you so much for spending your time with me during this lunchtime, during this wet, rainy Sydney day. Okay, so today we are going to be talking about privacy. Let's just jump in and get started today. This is probably going to be a quick one today. So WordPress and privacy. So depending on where you live, national or international regulations may require you to provide a privacy policy on your website, disclosing how you collect and how you share the personal data. In fact, if you're in Australia, then all your websites need to legally provide a privacy policy page. Now, privacy data and data, what is private data? Well, you probably know what it is, but just for layman's sake, it includes things like user's name, email, phone number, physical address, IP address, all that sort of stuff that you store on them. So it's not limited to that. It includes a lot more things, like anything to do with a user personal information. That's the private data that we're talking about today. So you may also be required to provide your users with the means to also request a copy of the information you hold on them, or a request to delete it as well. So again, it just really does depend on where you are, what country you're in, and what international regulations you have to comply with. But certainly here in Australia, if you have a website, you are legally bound to have a privacy policy page. Now, talking about requests for information that you hold or request for deletion. Now, that's certainly the case for the 2018 GDPR European law. That's the General Data Protection Regulation law. So that came into effect in 2018. So if you specifically target users that reside in the EU, or your main business is part of the EU, then your site is going to need to be GDPR compliant. So here's a link. I'll just copy this link here. I've dropped a link in the comments below. That's just an explanation about what GDPR means and how you can be compliant with that. Now, I just want to say, if you're in Australia, if you've got an Australian site and you're not specifically targeting European citizens, then you don't have to worry about being GDPR compliant, but you still need to have a privacy policy for that, to cover that in your website. There's another couple of people dropping in. Hello to you guys, and hello John, some of our WordPress regular viewers. Thanks so much for joining me today. Okay, fortunately, WordPress is quick to add simple administrator tools to allow compliance for GDPR and kind of just general privacy policy regulation. And that's what we're going to look at today. So from within the WordPress dashboard, see if I can make that bigger for you. There we go. Within the WordPress dashboard, you can navigate to settings, and since 2018, there's a new option called privacy down there. And here you can create a new privacy policy page, or select an existing page that you already have for that. So there's a link to a guide which gives helpful information about what to include on our privacy policy page if this is your first time creating one. So headings such as contact forms, cookies, analytics, data retention, where we send your data, where we store your data, all those sort of things and more should be covered by a privacy policy. So if you're looking for a more legal document, but you don't yet have the money to hire an expensive lawyer to to write one out for you, there's a great site that I suggest you use. I'll drop it in the comments just now. It's called Lawpath. So lawpath.com.au. They have a ton of specific legal documents, actually specifically for Australia and New Zealand. And they cover things like terms and conditions and privacy policy for websites. Now, the good thing about this site is if you sign up, you actually get one document for free. So I always recommend when I'm working with new clients that they sign up to lawpath.com, and the very first one that they should download is the website privacy policy, because it's a legally bound thing that you need to have on your website. Okay. So that's privacy policy, so built into WordPress, which is great. The next one we want to cover is exporting user data. Now, under certain circumstances and under certain privacy laws, such as GDPR, but in Australia it's a little bit of a more grey area, users can legally request access or ask you what data they hold, what data you hold on them. Now, if you need to be compliant with this, then WordPress does have a tool for this. So again, if you go to your WordPress dashboard and under Tools, there's an option called Export Personal Data, and that's what's on the screen here just now. So it's a bit of a process to do this. And obviously, you don't want to give personal data out to just anyone. So WordPress has a process for requesting this data and verifying. So if someone does ask you, what personal data do you hold on your website, then you can take their email address and add it into this box at the top here, username or email address, and send a request. What this does, it sends them an email that they need to reply to. They click on a link just to verify that they do indeed hold that email address. So once that they have been verified that they are the email address owner, then you can click on a link. You hover over the request information there, and you can download a zip file of all the data held on WordPress to your local machine. What this also does, it also sends another email out to the requester, and they can have a link that they click on, it downloads that data to their computer as well. Now, it is a zip file. The zip file contains a .json file, and it just lists all the information that WordPress holds for them, things like their username, email address, any preferences that they have set on their user profile. Now, remember, this data is only from within WordPress and participating plugins. So with plugins like WooCommerce, they comply with this. So if somebody has created an account, bought some products or a service through WooCommerce, then the data that you hold on them, and that could be things like address, shipping address, a telephone number, company name, things like that, that data will be exported as well along with this export process. But not all plugins and not all themes are compatible as well. So if someone is asking you what data you hold about them on your website, you might need to go a little bit digging more to try and find that data. So certainly download that JSON file, have a look through, see what data is there, and then just have a look and see if you've got any other plugins that maybe haven't complied with that particular WordPress request, and you need to add that onto the data as well. But it's certainly a great start. If you do have to comply with this request legally, then it's great that WordPress at least has these baseline tools for exporting that data out to somebody. So it's a great starter for 10. As well as users requesting what data you store on them, under certain legal requirements, they can also ask you to delete that information. And again, you need to be clear as to what your national or international laws are governing your website and your use of data. But certainly under GDPR, again, if you're dealing with European clients, I deal with European clients quite a lot, then they can, under that directive, under that law, ask you to delete all their user data. So WordPress, again, has a tool for doing that, and it's in your dashboard under Tools, and then Erase Personal Data. And that's the screen shot there. Just now, I've just zoomed that in for you. And the process is rather similar to the previous exporting data, where you need to verify the requester's email address before erasing any personal data. Now, it needs to be an administrator. You need to manually approve this request to remove the data in question. And just a few caveats. The data deleted is permanently removed from the database. So erasure requests, deletion requests, they cannot be reversed after they've been confirmed. So make sure that when you delete something, that it's the right thing, the right person that's data that's being deleted. So please note as well that this doesn't remove data from backups or archive files. So if you've got database backups running or file system backups running, if you do a restore, then you really need to honor these erasures, these deletions as well. So you need to go back into this tool and just see when you deleted data and then reapply that if you are restoring your site from a backup. So this tool here, it does not delete registered users or their user profile. So it just deletes some of the data that's in that JSON file from the previous slide. But it doesn't delete the actual account. So administrators, after you've ran this tool, will need to manually delete the users from the user dashboard area. Also note that administrators, they're not obliged to delete data that may be required to keep for other legal or statutory reasons. So things like if you need to report on your taxes, for products or services, then you might need to keep some associated user data on that, and also things like investigations. Then you might need to legally keep some user data from that. And under those circumstances, they trump that user request of erasing data from their site. Morris has a question. Does the WordPress export personal data tool provide data on, say, someone who just visited the site or maybe just completed a contact form, or is it just registered users data? That is a great question, Morris. Generally, what you'll see, you can try it on your own WordPress website, go into those tools and export data and just have a look and see what data that it shows for you. But generally, yep, so it's going to be mostly registered account data. So the user profile and any metadata that's been stored against that user profile. So when you have like a tool like WooCommerce, it extends that user profile to have things like shipping address, preferences, country, all that sort of stuff. That's the sort of data that we're talking about here with these two tools. If someone has just visited the website, then no, in general, it's not going to detect that information unless you have a plugin that is storing that IP address. So, for example, WordFence. If you've got WordFence installed, that tracks the IP address of people visiting. Now, there may not be a correlation between the IP and a username. So, it might not be an identifiable data for that. But certainly if you've got like a plugin that tracks people when they log in, then yeah, that would be personal data. But I think from your question here, Morris, if they're just visiting the website, then no, I don't think you need to be bothered with that because it's not personally identifiable for a person, unless you're storing something else with them, like an email address or a username that they can then sync those two together. Contact forms, that's a different process altogether, because yes, if people are submitting data with a contact form, then if you're storing that somewhere in the database, then yes, that's going to be personally identifiable data. And it would depend on the contact form plugin to see if they are compliant with these tools that WordPress have. I'm fairly sure that Gravity Forms is, and I'm fairly sure Contact Form 7 with the Database Store plugin isn't. But you'll basically need to go through the plugins that you use for contact forms, add a contact form in, and then just go to this export data there and see if it does actually store that data, if it gets out using those tools. There's not a lot of tools that are compliant with this. So yeah, you might have to go a bit digging if you do get these types of requests. But that's a great question, Morris. Thank you very much. Okay. So just kind of wrapping up, there's some national and international regulations. You actually may be legally obliged to explicitly ask users for their consent before you do or store or process personal information. So for example, storing cookies, you'll all be familiar with the little cookie bar that pops up on most websites, most European websites, because that's legal for them. They need to have that. But as well, things like submitting contact forms. Now, WordPress doesn't have this ability in core, so it doesn't have a consent functionality built in core, because its application is very dependent on what you're trying to do. But there are heaps of plugins out there that deal with GDPR, cookie, and other types of consents. But in general, let's talk about contact forms, because that's probably something that most people have on their website. So in general, it's considered best practice to include a consent box on all of your forms. Now, a simple checkbox with the word that I consent to my submitted data being collected and stored, that would cover the basics for that. I'll just pop that little phrase in the comments. And there. So yeah, so it's considered best practice nowadays. If you do have any sort of contact form, it's just to have a little checkbox, just asking for people's consent so you can store and process that data. And that just gets you round any issues with dealing with consent, because you're basically saying to somebody, can I store your data? Can I use it for marketing and stuff? And that's so that little checkbox there, that will deal with that. So yeah, best practice, you got a form, is to put a little checkbox on there and just make sure that you are covered for that. Okay, another question here. Please, can you confirm when you need the cookie consent? Okay. Under Australian law, you do not require a cookie bar. However, under the GDPR, so if you are targeting European people from European countries, then yes, you will need to have a cookie consent bar from there. The one that I use, someone's asking, I'll just copy that. I was just looking for that. I knew that question would come up, Gene. Which one do you recommend? Is this one here. So it's called Cookie Law Info on there, and that's the one I use on my European client websites for that. It's very simple and it's very configurable as well. Excuse me. If you are using Jetpack, Affiliate Jetpack has a cookie consent bar in there as well. So if you are using Jetpack, then have a little look in the options there. You'll see one. Otherwise, then that Cookie Law Info plugin is fantastic. But again, going back to that quick question from GNA Baron, you really need to have a look at your government websites. So if you're not in Australia, have a look at your main government website and search for if they have like an information officer there, an information office, and then see check with them what you need to comply with legally, or just hit up a lawyer as well. But again, I'm not a lawyer. I can't legally say exactly which conditions in your country you need to comply with. But certainly for in Australia, you definitely need to have a privacy policy page, but you don't need to have a cookie consent bar. But again, best practice, just in case, to cover yourself, I would put a check mark on those forms to say I consent for my data being collected in stores, and that just covers your basis for those types of requests. So that's it, just a quick one today. So please make sure and check that your website has a privacy policy, and if you are creating client websites, make sure that they have one too, because I can guarantee most people creating a new website, most businesses will probably forget to include that, and legally that could get them into a bit of a shiz. So we don't want that happening. Let me just have a quick look. There is one more question from Jean. Have you heard of any company in Australia getting sued? Is that for not having a policy page? No, not in particular. I don't know off the top of my head anyone who's particularly been sued or investigated. I'm sure that they probably wouldn't come after normal small businesses, but they will, if you have a privacy breach and then you don't have a privacy policy page, that's when you're going to get into trouble. So it's kind of like an insurance policy to have just in case something happens. Quick question from Morris. We're using a theme builder, page builder, pop-up option like Elementor provides be okay rather than specific plugin. If you're talking about a cookie consent, then yeah, I guess so, but it's probably going to be difficult to link that with actual cookies themselves, because in general, the cookie consent plugin, it actually checks to see if there's any cookies on there, and then it will pop up if it hasn't, or if there's already cookies there, then it kind of forgets it, kind of stores your IP address against the cookie to make sure it's not popping up all the time. So probably not, Morris. I'd probably go with a specific cookie plugin, the one that I linked, or another one there, rather than do a pop-up with the page builder. Let's see. John says, we inform our visitors that we use cookies and give them an option not to join. Yep, that's basically what cookie consent is. Everyone needs cookies to run. It's a really daft directive that was passed in the EU. I think it's just insane, because you can't have a website that doesn't have any cookies at all. It's just not going to work in these modern environments. So, everyone has a cookie bar and everyone has to give consent. It's just crazy, apart from those paranoid people who never surf the web and just sit in the basement all day. You're welcome, John. Okay, I'll do one last question from Joey. When you sign up to download a free ebook, for example, some websites send other emails promoting their paid products. Strictly speaking, this shouldn't be done without my consent. Right, that is absolutely correct, Joey. And this is where the privacy policy comes in place. So you should have a clause on your privacy policy that says things like contact form. We'll use your information on a per contact form basis for the specific action that the contact form is described on the contact forms. So that sort of wording. But yes, you are right, Joey. So if someone's signing you up for an ebook and they don't have a link to their privacy policy and they don't tell you exactly what that email is going to be used for, then yeah, that strictly speaking, they shouldn't be doing that sort of stuff. But yeah, so you really need to cover all that in your privacy policy to make sure that you have a statement that says things like, any information collected through contact forms, I have the right to use that for remarketing under my own brand. And then you'd have a quote to say, I don't share it with third-party advertisers, things like that. But yeah, great question. Okay, last question. I have my organizational privacy policy. Do we need to make a specific website one? Yes, you do. AB? Yep. So if you've got a website, you need to have your privacy policy on that website. You can use the same one so you can use your organizational privacy policy as a template, but obviously there's going to be things on the website that you do different from your physical organization. So you need to adapt that to your website and make sure you cover all those things like contact forms and Google Analytics tracking and things like that. Okay, guys, thank you so much for joining with me today. Thank you so much for your questions as well. Next week, I'm going to be covering online courses, so selling online courses. So probably having a quick look at LearnDash and a couple of other LMS plugins that you can use to sell online courses. It's just going to be a quick intro, so it's not going to be a deep dive into actual selling courses, but just some of the platforms, the plugins that you can use to start selling courses. And as always, fill out the little Google form. Give me some topic ideas as well for future quickies. That would be fantastic, and I'll queue them up over the next coming weeks. And very, very quickly, if you want to join us all, if you want to join the WP Australian WordPress community, you'll find links to Slack and to meetups on wpaustralia.org. and definitely worthwhile considering joining Slack. That's kind of where all of us developers and marketing and designer WordPressy type people hang out. We've always got it open on one of our screens. So again, you can get the link from WPAustralia.org, and that tells you how to sign up for a Slack account. And yeah, we've got heaps of channels in there. You can ask any questions. There's always somebody hanging around to answer your questions, and that's me. I'm happy to connect with you guys in LinkedIn. Just drop a little note when you're doing a connection request to make sure I know that you've come from the WP Quickies, or hit me up on Insta or Twitter. So thanks again, guys, for your attention, and join you guys next week. Bye.